It's just a scam. I don't make the rules. What's up, Victoria? It's Victoria, and face palettes are a scam, and in this video, I'm gonna explain to you why I feel that way. But if you are new to my channel, hello. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. This Pride Month, it's June, and I am so close to hitting 10,000 subscribers, and I would love for you to subscribe to me this month so that I can hit it during this month so I can be prideful. And that's very important to me, this Pride. So if you want to stick around, hit the subscribe button down below, and while you're down there, hit the like button. In my pinned comment, there will be links to a bunch of organizations. But I just want to highlight Sisters Pittsburgh. That's a local organization to me. They're a Black trans-led organization that helps trans Pittsburghers get the resources that they need. So if you have additional funds to support them this Pride Month, I would really appreciate it. But I also have sources to help immigrants that need your assistance and to help Palestinians. So if you want to support any of those causes, those will all be in my pinned comment down below. Before we dive too deep into the video, I just want to say if you're a makeup artist or if you're going to make an excuse that face palettes are for makeup artists, I'm going to ask you to shut up. I don't think that's a valid argument because we are in the consumer space. We are not professional makeup artists, most of us. There are some of you that are. And I'm not saying that they're a scam for makeup artists. For the general consumer, they're a scam. I've been into makeup for the last 10 years or so, and over the years, I've learned a lot, especially over the last 4 or 5 years since I've been doing this YouTube channel. And one of the things that has become very apparent to me over the years is that I don't like face palettes and I don't like duos, and I've decluttered most of mine. I actually have a couple examples in front of me, and they're all from my roommate's makeup collection because I don't have any more. They're going to be used as examples. Just because some of the things that I'm going to show you today are no longer available for purchase, that doesn't mean that we can't use them to learn. But also, towards the end of the video, I'll talk about a really relevant example and also include a bonus review for you. One of the things that I realized the quickest when it came to face palettes is that I would never use all of the shades. So one of the first palettes I ever owned that was a face palette was the Kat Von D Shade and Light palette, which had highlight and contour shades for 3 different skin tones. I only have 1 skin tone. What was I going to do with the other 4 shades that I wasn't using? And I barely used the highlight shade in the Shade and Light palette. So I was really only using the contour. So I really only needed that 1 shade of contour. In front of me, I have this Park Ave Princess palette that Tarte released limited edition a couple of years ago, or maybe more than a couple of years ago. This is a similar idea to the Shade and Light palette. This is made for multiple skin tones. So there are 2 highlights and those look better for fairer skin. But when it comes to the contours, I probably would only really be able to use this one on my face, but I would have no purpose for this. The argument of you can use it for an eyeshadow is not valid, especially if you are someone who has a makeup collection that also includes a lot of eyeshadow. If you have a lot of eyeshadow in your makeup collection, you are never going to choose to use this brown matte shade in here in lieu of one of the eyeshadows in one of your palettes. I think we all see palettes like this and we think, oh, it's so convenient, but I just don't know that it's as convenient as we might think they are. Here's a highlighter palette from Tarte, and it has 4 shades in it, and I would really only be able to use this shade right here for highlight. I had this palette. I used the 2 shades I liked a lot, but then I never used these 2 shades. Again, the argument for them being an eyeshadow is invalid. I would never reach for this over my eyeshadow palettes that have better shimmer shades for my eyes in it. So why would I pick this? Even if a palette is made for 1 skin tone, like this palette from Pat McGrath, just because it's made for my skin tone doesn't mean I'm gonna like all of the shades in it. In this palette, I probably would have only used this blush shade in this palette. I probably wouldn't have reached for this highlighter or this blush. If I were to have purchased this whole palette and I only use the 1 blush shade, then I pay the whole cost of this palette for that 1 blush shade. Using this as an example, if I liked one of these highlighters and I only opened this palette ever to use the 1 highlighter, and I open it and I always am using that 1 highlighter and I never choose any of the other highlighters in this palette to use, then what has happened is I've panned the 1 thing that I do like, and then the rest of the palette remains untouched, which is a bit of a waste, I would say. And I think that happens to a lot of people, and then they try to get creative, especially if they're a project panner. They will do a bunch of things to like use it as eyeshadow or try to find alternative ways to use it quicker and try to use up the rest of the palette. But wouldn't it just be a more informed decision to just buy the 1 shade that you like? Sometimes there are limited edition shades in palettes that you can only get that one way. Perhaps buying a whole palette for that 1 shade wouldn't be worth it. There are a lot of makeup brands that are making a lot of similar shades, and perhaps you could have found that in a different formula and just bought the 1 shade that you wanted. Also, going back to the highlighter shade, it just like brings the perceived value down. These are not full-size products most of the time, and that means I paid way more for basically the cost of 1 mini, and that's just like not going to be worth it for me. Another problem that comes with face palettes is they're usually large. Obviously, they're not always as large as this one from Natasha Denona, but they are bigger.
You're big! Did you hear me? Big.
Big.
And depending on what your storage looks like, you might not be able to store these big palettes where you normally store your face products, so your blushes and your bronzers and your highlights. I have a blush, bronzer, and highlight drawer. I have organizers in them, and palettes that are this big don't fit into those organizers, so I end up usually putting things this size with my eyeshadow palette. This is very directly related to me, very rarely go into my eyeshadow palette drawer. I'm a person who normally just chooses like a sparkly shade and then a single matte, and then that's what it is. Keep it pretty simple with my eye looks these days. I very am rarely reaching in my eyeshadow palette for my eyeshadows, and I'm certainly not going into my eyeshadow drawer to pull out a face palette. That will just reduce the likelihood of me using it at all by keeping it with my eyeshadows if it's not with my blushes and bronzers. But there's also something to whenever I see the compacts that are singular, like there's one product in those compacts. Whenever I look at those compacts, I'm like, oh, I know what blush I have in that formula, or what blushes I might have in that formula that comes in that packaging. And I'll be like, oh yeah, no, I like that one. But whenever I see something like this, I'm like, there's a lot in there and I'm not really sure what's in there. It's like I can't think of it off the top of my head. Obviously, this is coming from someone who is a content creator who tries a lot of makeup and who has always kind of had a larger makeup collection. That reduces the value as well to me. I have a lot of makeup. If I don't know it well enough and I'm already not really organically reaching for face palettes, I just like don't normally know what's in there well enough to think of it off the top of my head. But my little single things that are really special, because they're the star of the show, they're the only thing in that packaging, stays in my head a lot easier and a lot better. So I will reach for those over and over again. So let's talk about a very rare thing, something that probably will never happen. What if there is a face palette that is created and it has only shades I like in it? And I actually went through and made like a face palette that I find desirable with my own makeup collection, and we'll talk about this in just a moment. If this existed, made as a face palette, singularly, like a brand made it, and it was like all of these shades are your favorite shades and you use these shades all of the time, even if that existed. I like to play with my makeup and I like to play with all parts of my makeup, even if this was the perfect palette. Well, what if I don't want to wear that blush shade or that blush shade? It's like, well, I'm going to have to resort to using something else. I have other bronzers that I really like, so maybe I wouldn't want to use my Gucci bronzer that day or the bronzer that shade that day. I would want to use something else. The way that I utilize makeup, that is not something that I'm going to come back to on a regular basis because it's just not how I think about my makeup. I think an argument that people oft make for face palettes is like, oh, they're so travel friendly. I can just put one of these palettes and it's like, oh, I have blushes and I have highlights and I don't have to worry about blushes or highlights because they're all in the palette. There are people who travel a lot for work, or they have a lot of money and a lot of free time to leisurely travel regularly. I think in theory, that's a good concept for some people. And I think that it could be a valid argument, but there are a lot of people like me, someone who maybe only actually packs my makeup and travels 1 to 2 times a year, saying, oh, there's a lot of value in this because I can travel with it. That's just not a real argument for me. In theory, it would be nice to have like a face palette like this one that has like contours, bronzers, and blushes in it and be like, this is all I need when I travel and I have options because they're all in my face palette. That sounds nice. Where am I going? Like, how often am I going? I don't know. For me and the amount of travel that I do, it's not really a hassle for me to put my single compacts in my bag. I don't think they take up that much space. And if I really want to bring them, I just will. I will find the space. I will find the time. I'll find the way to make them work and bring them with me. I'm not always running around doing that. So like that extra time that I put into figuring out how to get all those things to come with me traveling, that's not a big deal to me because it's like I'm not traveling enough and losing that much time by making that choice or that thought or going through the process of doing that. Some people will also argue for face palettes. Like, let's say, and like Tarte's, I think, a pretty good example of this. Someone who flexes through skin tones throughout the year, who has like a medium or deeper complexion. And I do feel like most people who this happens to is like they tend to be like medium or have like deeper skin. In the summertime, they just become darker. And it's not because they're like actually spending that much more time in the sun. They're just like kind of in the sun more inherently because there's more sun to be in because it's summertime, the days are longer. They might like to spend time outside. Even if they are wearing SPF, like the likelihood of them still getting color, that can happen. And so something like this can really help them flex throughout the year, which I like think that argument is really valid, but think about yourself. I don't really go out in the sun even in the summertime, and my skin, even if I were to get sun, wouldn't change that much. Like my skin doesn't get that much darker, and I'm just actually more likely to like get red. That argument for me to have something to like flex flex between my skin tones is also not valid either for me. There are people it's valid for, but it's just like for me, and I'm thinking about myself, that's like something that one might have to take into consideration. To make my point even clearer, I invested some money to both review a product for you in this video, but also to make a point, and I bought 3 of the Westman Atelier blush duos. Obviously, this is a very specific thing. A lot of people wouldn't spend this much money to make this point, but I was interested in the product, and it also helps make my point because I also think duos are a scam, and I consider duos to be face palettes. So I bought 3 variations of the blush duos: Suede and Sable, Petal and Biscuit, Mimi and Coquette. Westman Atelier is a brand I always have my eye on. I really like how they package things. I think that they live up to the fantasy of what it's like to hold a luxury product. Not every product from Westman Atelier works perfectly for me. It's a brand I always have my eye on. So whenever they were releasing blushes and they decided to release them in a duo, I thought this is a great way to make my point because it really limits what I'm able to do. I have the cream version of Mimi and it's a color I really like. So I thought, oh, having a powder version of it could be handy. It would be maybe easier to travel with. It would be the same color. Well, it turns out they're not the same color. And to get it, I also had to buy Coquette, which is a shade that I'm actually not super interested in. $75 for the one blush. And it's like basically half a blush because it only takes up half of the product, which is really infuriating. If it was sold as a single, I could have gotten just Mimi and I think I would have been satisfied. Oh, what if I wanted like something to sculpt my face? Well, Biscuit's only in this one. That is their like bronzer shade for fairer skin. And it comes with the shade Petal, which Petal is like a pretty blush, but I don't think it's an exciting blush. And it wouldn't have been something that I would have really had my eye on. So there's Petal and then there's Biscuit. So for me to get Biscuit to sculpt my face and then also have Mimi to use as a blush, it's like, well, now I need the 2, but then also now I also have 2 additional blushes that I have no interest in using. And then there's Suede and Sable, which in the grand scheme of things would have been the perfect duo for me because it is like the colorway that I like the most and I do like both of the shades. And so like that is kind of nice. But as I was saying earlier, the way that I think about makeup is it's gonna either be the Suede blush or the Sable blush in my mind, or because there are 2 in here, if it was living in my makeup collection, I wouldn't think about it to use because that's just not how my brain works. Even though this in theory is the perfect duo for me, I just know that longevity wise in my makeup collection, I like wouldn't reach for this as much as my other blushes because they are a duo and I wouldn't think about them. I really wish brands would offer just singles if they're gonna release blushes, especially like in the case of Westman Atelier. Face palettes like these tend to be like limited edition or they only release them like in the summertime or in the springtime. But I think this is a permanent product for Westman Atelier and it's like, well, okay, so I love this blush and let's say like I use Suede more and I use Suede all the way up. I still have Sable to get through. And that would also happen in the Mimi and Coquette one. And it would also happen in the Petal and Biscuit one. But because I promised a review, I'm going to review these in this video because I bought them and I feel like we should also take the time to go through them. When we look at the packaging, one of the big things that people had complaints about whenever this product came out was how not luxury it looked compared to the rest of the Westman Atelier brand. Westman Atelier usually comes in very luxe packaging. So this, I would say, is their quote unquote normal compact, but obviously they are moving in different directions. And this is really heavy. This is heavier than this duo and it has a pan of highlighter in it. This is their Peau de Rose. This is just like when you think of like old luxury makeup, it's weighty. It feels like it was expensive to have made. Whenever you're talking about a $75 price point, which is what both of these are at, this feels like something that's like, okay, that could be $75, where this doesn't really look or feel like something that might be $75. I don't know if they are now finally working on it because they did release refills of their lipsticks recently, which they hadn't done at launch, but a lot of their product is sold as refillable. Their face powder, these highlighters, their bronzer, like everything's kind of sold as refillable. Like there is a hole to poke out the product in the back, but whenever they launched these, they didn't do that. So there's like no illusion that they're ever going to like release refill pans for these because that's just not how the product is made. These blushes are glued in. I do want to make a slight argument for the packaging if you haven't interacted with these and you had your nose up in the air a little bit. Now, it certainly isn't as heavy or as luxurious as the Westman Atelier packaging usually is. This top part is like a metal piece, latex, and then the rest of it is plastic. It does feel really nice. I do think that the brand is considering these minis, and that scares me because like I think that they're like, that's a mini product and it's still $75, which is like bananas, but I think that's what they were thinking. I did confirm this with the brand. There's 9.6 grams of product. I feel like when this came out, a lot of people were like, you're getting less product than what they usually offer. But if you look at this product, you get 4 grams of product in this. There's actually more product in this than there is in this one. Now, it will depend on your usage. There technically is more product than packaging in this. This colorway is Petal Biscuit. I don't love the shade Biscuit. That's their Bronzer shade for their line, and it comes in the cream. And I have done a short, which I will just reference you to because I think I do a pretty good job comparing it there. The shades are pretty much the same. Once they're on the cheek, you can't really tell. I've tried applying this in a thicker concentration more as a contour. I don't like the color for me, and I also have applied it with a bronzer brush, something light and fluffy and airbrushed looking, and I also don't like it for that. It's just not a good shade for me, and it kind of is a little green. And I find that a lot of like contour products can be a little bit green. And I don't know if that's on my skin tone or if a lot of bronzer colors just like have green in them. Then there's the shade Petal, which I believe is their best selling blush shade. They did release that in like a kit a year or so ago, like a holiday kit. It was like in this packaging. And then this was like the final result. And I don't know, this blush shade I think is like pretty, but it's kind of like standard fare blush color. Like it's just like, oh, it's kind of like a muted pink. I'm not losing my mind over this color. If I wasn't using these to make a point, like if I were to make a perfect blush duo, bronzer duo blush palette with this in mind, I wouldn't have bought these. So I'm going to give this to a friend. Something to note about these blushes is that they are pigmented, and it's weird when you're using them with a brush. Your brush will pick up just so much pigment. It applies to your face right away. It is really blendable. Once it's on your face, you might like freak out a little bit, but like I've never felt like I've over applied these blushes. And if you are fairer skinned, I think that you should know that before you buy them. Like if you don't love a super pigmented blush, then I would say maybe something to avoid. The bronzer blush duo comes in 3 different colorways, so this would be like the lightest version. There's like a medium version and a deep version. That's another thing to be said. I didn't buy any of the other ones because I didn't want any of the other bronzer shades, and I didn't really care for the blushes, but there's also scenarios where you might need the like lightest contour or bronzer shade or the deepest bronzer shade, but you might like the blush in one of the other duos, which is like a problem. The brand just makes that decision for you, which I find incredibly annoying. But also back to the pigmentation. They are more pigmented than you might think. If you have a deeper skin tone, you might be able to make some more shades work for you. Maybe minus this shade right here, the shade Coquette. You might be able to make some of these shades work for you even with a deeper skin tone. So if you have the opportunity to swatch them in store, I would recommend it. Now let's talk about Mimi and Coquette. Now I do, as I said, have the cream shade of Mimi. So cream Mimi, powder Mimi. They're pretty close. They're both on top of powder. I do feel as though there's a little more pinkiness in the cream shade, and it also looks that way in the pan. And this is what they look like next to each other. The Mimi cream is pinker. I did depot mine. The powder version is more brown, and I would say maybe a little warmer. And I feel like whenever it's like on my cheek and you see it on both sides of my face, it's not as different looking as it does in the swatch. Cream Mimi and then powder Mimi. When you look at them, you're kind of like, those don't look similar at all, but when you put it on the cheek, there is something that makes them look more similar because you're not applying them in this like thick swatch here. And it's weird because the finger swatches of these make them look not super pigmented, but every time I've picked them up with a brush, there's something about the bristles of the brush getting in there and picking it up that just like they're so pigmented. This duo, I think, is the duo that works the best for me, but I also find it a little bit confusing. So Mimi is a pretty dark shade, and I think people with a deeper complexion than me could use Mimi as a blush and it would look really great on them. But Coquette, I'm not so sure because there's a lot of white in there and it's just like so light compared to Mimi. I was concerned about that when I got it, but I have used them as a duo on my cheek in a previous video, and I've used them on my cheeks outside of just like filming. I put them on and like there's just something about like putting Mimi on the lower part of my cheek and then putting Coquette on the top part of my cheek is kind of as a highlight, and they kind of ombre together really beautifully. They really work in that respect, and it ends up looking like this beautiful, warm, it's really pretty. I wouldn't know that. Like, it's like, this feels like such a hard sell. It's really beautiful once you get it. I just was talking about wearing them out in public. These have really great longevity on the cheek. Like, they are still as pigmented on the cheek at the end of the day as they are whenever you first apply them. There's something to that as well. And then we have Suede and Sable. These shades are a little bit harder for me to apply to my fairer skin and make them look as like seamless as something like Coquette or even Petal. There's just something about these two, but I would say that these are the most interesting shades that I got to try from the brand. And that's one thing that I do think Westman Atelier does really well, is I think that they pick and formulate really beautiful colors. You might think that's just a pink. You might not be able to find a dupe of it when you're in Sephora swatching everything. And I feel very similarly about these two shades. There's Suede and there's Sable. And I use them very similarly to how I use Coquette and Mimi. And I keep Sable closer to the bottom part of my cheek. And then I put Sable closer to like the apple of my cheek, and it looks really beautiful together, and they're beautiful on their own. I really like this one, and if I were to recommend any individual one, if you were interested in them, if you like both of these shades, I think this one's the one that makes the most sense to me, more so than the blush and bronzer duo, and more so than the Coquette Mimi one. Like, it's just like, there's just something about these two shades that I find deeply compelling together. I did buy these to make this video, to review them for you, but also be like, for me to get my perfect Westman Atelier duo, I have to buy multiple duos, and they're never going to be in the same packaging, and I just hate that. And so now it really comes down to like, would I keep any of these, or would I recommend them to you? I wouldn't recommend them to you. I don't think that these are worth the money, not because of the packaging or like the product inside. It's just like the fact that they're duos. I would have rather have them release like $40 singles, even if it was coming in this pink packaging, or sell me one of these, or sell me just a refill pan in one of these. So I don't really love the way that the brand decided to put these out. I really don't like duos, but I will be keeping Suede and Sable, and I also will keep Coquette and Mimi. But I'm about to see a friend at the end of the month, and I think that I will give that to them. You might be wondering to yourself, you're like, Tom, what's the solution? What do we do if we really want a face palette, or we like the idea of a face palette, but like the pre-made ones aren't perfect for us? What's the answer? There are actually brands that sell refill pans that are magnetic, so all you would need is like an empty palette like this one, and then you can buy from those brands and make your own face palettes. Just a couple examples. This isn't like a definitive example, but Salt New York makes cream products, and you can get foundation, concealer, blush, and bronzer, and contour all from them, and make your dream face palette. Highlighter too. You can make your dream face palette, and like then you get to pick the colors that go in your face palette. They can all work for you. Also, the beautiful thing about choosing to build your own palette, if you're buying from multiple brands, if you like a blush formula from one brand and not the other brand, you can just buy the blush from the one brand, and you like the other brand's bronzer colors more, you could buy the bronzer from the other brand, and then you're just kind of like putting your ideal face palette together, which is like, you know, kind of the example that I did here. Salt New York does it, Kira Weiss does it, Makeup Forever does it. I think Viseart sells refills of their face products, MAC, Charlotte Tilbury. There are a lot of brands that do it. There are definitely like a lot of indie brands that sell like face products in single pans as well. You can go that route. If you know of brands that sell individual face products in pans, let us know in the comments. Like I said, this is like an incomplete list, so would love to hear more examples. There is like another option, which is like kind of the option that I have been doing more recently. I wasn't rotating through my blushes a lot, and I came to the decision that I think I might use my blushes more if I depotted them. I'm not going to explain to you how to depot them. There are a lot of YouTube videos where people explain to you how to depot things. I was gifted this beautiful palette from a friend, my friend Ananda, who's medium olive on Instagram. She's really a great resource if you have olive undertone skin. She's a great resource for you to know what colors might work on your skin tone better, and just like understand your olive undertone better. But she's very kind and gifted this to me for the holidays, and I depotted a lot of my blushes and put them in here. Now when I do my makeup not on camera, I just pull out this palette, I open it up, and then I see all of my blushes in one place, and I can see all of the colors, and then I just apply whichever ones I want from my beautiful blush palette. I also started doing it with my bronzers, but the blushes were the more important option for me. And if you're following along here, now I have bronzers and blushes, and I can take an empty magnetic palette, and whatever blushes and bronzers I might be in the mood for and using a lot, I can just make that and keep it. I know the blushes that I really like in there, but then it's fully customizable. So once I'm sick of some of those shades, I can rotate in new ones or just make a completely new face palette. And I think that's like a really good resolve for all of this as well. There's a lot of work that goes into depotting, and the success rate is not guaranteed. I don't recommend it for everyone. You have to be like really interested interested in doing this if you're interested in it. By the way, update on this, if you're someone who watches all of my videos, I still really love this idea, and I think it's just kind of like the best thing I've ever done. I'm cooling it on purchasing products probably for most of the rest of the year, and I don't think I have any intentions of buying cheek products unless I get sent some in PR. I can finally get to a point where like everything will be depotted and in here. If we got to the end of this video, if you like are so mad at me, like I'm sure you probably already left a comment, but like it doesn't really matter. Like if you love face palettes and you get a lot of value in face palettes, I'm so happy for you. I think that some people, just because some people like face palettes, they'll hear other people rave about face palettes and be like, why am I the one who like never seems to get value out of them? I keep buying face palettes and I like never seem to use them. You're not alone. I just wanted to kind of put the vibe out there. It's like face palettes are only great, only a good purchase for you if all of the shades work for you and you don't have a ton of makeup to rotate through and you don't love trying new things. If you're a bare bones minimal makeup person, perhaps buying one of those Hourglass palettes for $80 every year, you use all of the shades, and by the time the next year rolls around, it is time for you to re-up on something like that. I think that might be a good value for you. But a lot of the people who watch makeup content online or consume my content, they are people who are very into makeup, and buying one face palette or having multiple face palettes for them might not be a sensible thing for them to do. And I'm not trying to tell you don't have a large makeup collection, you should have a minimal makeup collection. That's not what I'm trying to argue either. If the intent is on using your makeup, is a face palette really the most valuable way for you to interact with your makeup? And if the answer is no, that's okay. You can move along onto buying things that make more sense for you to buy. Anyway, that's gonna wrap up the video. If you are new and you're not yet subscribed, please hit the subscribe button down below. I'm on Patreon and I have channel memberships. You can find those linked down below. I do one additional video over there every single month. The pinned comment has a bunch of great things you can donate your money to if you want to do that right now. And that's gonna wrap up the video for me. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to follow your haute and you'll find me. And I'll see you in a video very soon. Go forth. Ta-ta.